Hello ladies, gentlemen, and persons in between. My name is Tim Snowborn, and today we're here to talk about the separation of church and state on this American Values episode of Serious Issues. So last time we talked about the conservative value of traditions and the preservation of culture. Today I thought we'd switch to a liberal value and talk about the separation of church and state. I don't believe I'm aware of any evidence at all that liberals are against the separation of church and state. That seems to be pretty universally important to us for obvious reasons. We know what happens when you give religion the power of the state. We've looked at our history at times when the church had control over the government, and we saw what happened. And even today, we look at the Muslim theocracies in the Middle East and say, no, we don't want any of that. Liberals recognize that America is a very diverse place with a great variety of religions and belief systems, and we'd rather not let any of them rule over the others. I don't believe I've ever heard a person who calls themselves a liberal argue that any one religion or belief system should have dominion over the rest of them. So yeah, there's basically no evidence I can think of to suggest that liberals are against the separation of church and state. There's a perception among conservatives that liberals are against Christianity, and there is some truth to that to the extent that Christians cannot leave other people alone. That is what we're actually against. What liberals don't want is to be compelled to live by principles that are specific to Christianity. We're okay with living by the thou shalt not kill principle because that one's pretty universal. But the part about tithing and honoring the Sabbath, that's specific to Christianity, and we don't want to be compelled to live by those. Some conservatives are unrealistically terrified of the prospect of being put under the rule of Sharia law, but they're okay with the idea of the Bible being made the law of the land because it's not a theocracy if it's your religion. If Christians would not try to legislate their morality, we wouldn't have an issue. Now I hear conservatives going, oh, but it's okay for liberals to legislate their morality? No, guys, the morality that gets legislated is supposed to be the consensus. I know that you often disagree with the consensus, but remember what consensus means. Consensus means the majority opinion. In a democracy, the majority opinion is supposed to hold sway. It doesn't always, but that's how it's supposed to go, at least in theory. And the morality that gets legislated is what the majority has decided it should be. Again, you may disagree with the majority, but this is a democracy. The other thing that liberals are very much against is people not being treated as equals. We very much believe in the constitutional principle that all men are created equal. And by men, we actually, of course, mean men and women. All people are created equal. And it really bothers us when we see people not being treated as equals. The problem is that some people who call themselves Christians, and I say some, not all, but some people who call themselves Christians don't want everyone to be treated as equals. They don't want women to be treated as equals. They don't want gay people to be treated as equals. They don't want people of other religions to be treated as equals. Some of them even think they have a biblical justification for treating other races as lesser than themselves. The Bible was absolutely used to justify racism and slavery. I can't remember what verses people actually pointed to justify slavery, but there are verses in the Bible that talk about slaves and slavery, and people used to say, hey, it says we can own slaves in here, so we're going to do that. Still today, the Klan considers themselves a Christian organization and quotes verses from the Bible to back that up. So again, I maintain that if Christians would leave other people alone and treat everyone as equals, we would not have a beef with them. I mean, the animosity toward Christians wouldn't go away overnight. They have a well-earned reputation for sticking their nose in other people's business and treating people who are different than them like crap. I know the ideal is that we're supposed to forgive and forget, but most people don't find it that easy, of course. So, are some conservatives in favor of the separation of church and state? I can't remember any specific people or quotes, but I vaguely remember reading something from a few of them to suggest that they do believe in the separation of church and state. Not all conservatives believe in the separation of church and state, but a small handful do. The vast majority of them seem to be against it. I can't think of any issue or aspect of American life that conservatives agree religion should stay out of. The vast majority of them seem to at least think that the government should be guided by Christian principles, except, of course, the part about having a moral obligation to take care of the poor and the downtrodden. To their credit, I don't think most conservatives believe that non-Christians should be compelled to convert to Christianity. Most of them seem to be at least grudgingly okay with other people not believing as they do. They just think that their beliefs should take priority in all applicable situations. Many conservatives, of course, believe that America is a Christian nation and cite quotes from the Founding Fathers to support that theory. But there are at least as many quotes from the Founding Fathers to say that it isn't a Christian nation, including one that specifically says America is in no way founded on the Christian religion. The Founding Fathers knew what happens when you give the power of the state to a religion. They knew what a recipe for disaster that is. The Constitution guarantees your right to practice your religion, and for the most part you can. You can read the Bible and pray as you like. You just can't do it in a way that is endorsed by the state. So tell me what you think, guys. Do you think the separation of church and state is important? Do you think there's any evidence to suggest that conservatives support it too? Do you think there's any evidence to suggest that many liberals are against it? Thank you very much for joining me for this conversation. If this is your first time on my channel, welcome. It's great to have you here. I'd love to have you subscribe and join me for future conversations and check out my previous videos for more. If you're a current subscriber, welcome back. It's great to have you tuning in again. I really appreciate your continued support. Thanks again for joining me, everyone. Go with God, or without. I don't care, whatever.